Welcome to Adeptus On Air, the show where we examine how individuals and companies make decisions that drive their business and personal success. Each week, we connect with notable professionals who pull back the curtain on the industries that Adeptus has been on the cutting edge of for the last 30 years, including music, sports, and entertainment, as well as new emerging markets. Welcome to our latest edition of Adeptus On Air, and today we have great guests in Tina and Tony Rowe. This is the first time actually on Adeptus On Air that I'm interviewing two people at the same time, so it should be a lot of fun. Now, both of you are in a great space in terms of coaching different things such as accountability and a lot of those things that we're gonna go through. But before we go into that, just kind of give us the in-depth sports background that both of you have, because it was very impressive when I read it.
You want to start?
Ladies first.
Okay. James, thanks. First off, I just want to say thanks for having us on today. We're really excited to be here. I did gymnastics through high school, middle school, high school, and then through college at the Air Force Academy. So most of my background is all of that. Pretty much, I was just the one sport athlete, just, with the amount of time that gymnastics takes, it was really difficult to pick up any other sports that way. And I love gymnastics. So that is my background as far as that goes.
For me, I was a three-sport kid growing up into high school. And then my freshman year of high school, I was only football and hockey. But hockey, I grew up in Minnesota, so hockey was really kind of, I guess, my avenue, and I kind of knew that. So after high school, it was college hockey, and then I tried out for a semi-pro team and really was like a reserve player, if anything at all. And then right as the season was about to start, I deployed in the military anyway, so it didn't really matter. I never touched the ice, so then that probably would have been the case anyway. So,
no.
But that's kind of the three sports to really one that was the primary.
That's awesome, and it's led you in a roundabout way to this current space where you are to help other young athletes, learn things like discipline and accountability. Just tell me how you got into that space, and what your mission is and goal to help others.
So both of our daughters played sports all through growing up. And so kind of watching them and the challenge they had, challenges with coaches, challenges with just being positive, I think, with themselves and how it's going. We just Tony coached in high school for the high school lacrosse team. And so we just were really looking at ways that we could give back and ways that maybe we could help other people in a way that we weren't able to necessarily help our daughter when she was going through just some challenging times with her self-doubt and just how she kind of went through her season and just the mental struggles with that kind of led us to looking at, what is it that we could do that could help athletes today to help them to kind of be a little bit more focused, a little bit more disciplined, really understanding why they're doing what they're doing and to help set them up for better success.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I think to piggyback on that a little bit, it stemmed from we were athletes, and then we had a family of athletes, and then we knew the things that we had dealt with. We both were high school athletes, then college athletes at the Air Force Academy, which has its own, environmental factors built into it, I guess, if you will. And then our girls were multiple different sports growing up, and then kind of faded into high school girls lacrosse. I ended up being an assistant coach and then head coach of the girls high school lacrosse team here for the school that the girls went to. And high school is just a dynamic time in general for the kids, obviously, but I think it's even more of it can be more of a struggle occasionally for young girls as they're coming up and, learning who they are, what do they want to do, who are we hanging out with, what are we doing, what are people saying, and all these things that can kind of I think really kind of wrap them up and get them a little bit into a spiral. So there was lots of things that we were seeing through coaching and being a part of the booster club and watching the girls just from being young ages up to the high school age. And then they both went to college and played, like we were saying. And there was gaps, I guess, where we were like, what is an area that we can think of an idea that can help any athlete at any age through any challenge of athletics, but also just make them a little bit more of a well-rounded person in life as well. Athletics is a big and part of that, but there were tools that we thought we could come up with and think about, and with the help of our daughters, kind of said, hey, this is an area where I think we could make a really good change and be a part of something positive for athletes and kids in general as they move on. Because statistically, the high school athlete, it drops drastically, like from like 7.5 million to like 500,000.
Wow.
7.5 million high school athletes, only 500,000 college athletes.
Yeah.
So it's not all athletics, it's focused on that, but all of the athletics and the lessons that we learn, I think, help us in life, regardless of what level we go to play, that we end up playing at.
No, I that's great insight with that, and I definitely appreciate that. And I wanted to ask, because you've seen it through your eyes as a different generation, and now you see it through the current generation, coming up. What are some of the different challenges that they face today? Because society has changed a lot from when we were, in high school and things like that to now. What are some of the differences that you've seen and the different challenges that today's youth coming up playing athletics may have that maybe we didn't when we were in high school?
Like the social media piece, I think, is pretty big because, everybody posts the amazing things they do. Like everybody's life looks amazing. And so I think, if you're an athlete and you're following other athletes, maybe all you see is this person is constantly scoring, or this person, is winning this award or that award. And I think it can make you be really hard on yourself. Same thing with like just some of the body struggles that, like, especially girl athletes go through. I think there's a lot of that too, where you're seeing what athletes look like. You didn't really see the athletes you were competing against until you actually were at a meet with them. But now you could actually follow that athlete their whole season before you even ever get to a competition with them. So I think, just kind of seeing things on social media. I don't want to say things were harder or less hard in any direction, because I think that athletes are the same. I think there's a lot more emphasis on the mental health piece of athletics today, and helping kids get through things, and the mentality of our generation of just kind of deal with it, suck it up, move on. I think we're not throwing that out at kids as much as maybe we heard that when we were growing up. You just kind of worked through it, and you either continued to do your sport, or for many kids, they just quit, when it got to be too difficult for whatever reason. I think they just stopped playing.
Yeah, I think there's a pressure aspect. Like, it's very rare to me to find or see or hear about the three-sport high school athlete, like the three-sport letterman who's really good and is doing well at all of them, unless there's kind of a tie, like a track and a cross country. Like that's kind of a little bit of a different, but like the captain of the football team is one of the better baseball players, and he also plays basketball. Well, it seems to me, in my opinion, that sometimes we pigeonhole and get kids into a sport, and then it's a club, and then it's a year-round thing for whatever that sport may be. Just for even lacrosse, we had fall ball, we had indoor over the winter, we had the season, then you had your travel team in the summer. Like there was never a break, if you will, for the kid to kind of decompress, or the student athlete to at least decompress a little bit and go, is there another sport that I might want to try? And the ability for kids to kind of try a couple different things and see failure, which goes into the social media and the pressure, like, hey, you're going to learn a lot from a loss, or you can learn a lot from a loss, just like you can learn a lot and feel really good about a win. There's pluses and minuses and positives and negatives that you can take from any of those outcomes. Even a bad practice and versus a good practice and how you feel about it, and then how you move forward in a positive way from that.
Yep. Yep. No, I
Yeah,
agree.
because even James, I'm sorry to interrupt you.
No
A
problem.
thought I had was that when you look at somebody's season, when the season is that last championship game, the majority of kids end on a loss.
Yep.
Most kids do not walk away from whatever sports season it is, whether it's track field, swimming, hockey, lacrosse, gymnastics. Most kids walk away with a loss. And so it's trying to figure out, can I still look back on my season, even with a loss, and maybe I'm not the number one champion, or my team wasn't the national champion or conference championships, but can I look back through my season and pull out things that I did really well and say, you know what? So we didn't win the final game, but you know what? I had a great season. I improved. I was a great teammate. What about that was amazing? And that's kind of another aspect of what we really wanted to be able to look at is give kids a tool to be able to look back over their season and go, you know what? I set this as a goal and I met this. I did improve from the beginning, the first game to the last game, and be able to pull out things that they did good, and things that they did well.
Yeah, I agree 100%. It's definitely needed. And I saw several things that you all really work on, with your athletes, and some things stuck out. I just wanted to kind of get your take on several of them, these attributes. Accountability, that's a big one. How do you coach that? Especially like I have a 6 and 7 year old, so these are things that I'm thinking about now, but it's hard. How do you coach that in young athletes to be accountable, not only for themselves, but for the team and things of that nature?
Well, I think one thing that the Sports Hog Journal does is it kind of chronologically takes you through your season. So whether you're using the journal or just a notepad, but if you put something down, if you think about it enough and you write it down like a goal or an objective that you want to achieve. And as an example, like when I was coaching the high school lacrosse team here, I would make the girls on a piece of paper at the very beginning of the season, like day one of practice. I'm like, hey, what are your goals and objectives for yourself? Like 1 or 2 for yourself, and then 1 or 2 for the team. And then what those put them down on paper, and I had them put them in an envelope and put their name on them and hand them in. Now I would look at them afterwards, right? As the season goes on, and try to kind of push or maneuver whatever that student athlete was in an individual way, maybe into some of the things that I know that they had said. But at the end of the season, we would have them open it up and read it. And then you go, okay, did you do the things that you wanted to do? Did you say and be the teammate that you wanted to be? Were you for your individual goals? Did you maybe cheat yourself out of an extra 5 minutes of practice that maybe could have helped you catch a pass, just as an example? How did you treat or respond to teammates in both a victory and a loss? Like all of these things that they maybe had put down where they wanted to do something, or they said at the beginning of the season, I want to do this specific thing. We would kind of recap that at the end and go, hey, did you do that? Were you able to do that? And if not, how can you improve? Like, how can you do that? It had to be a high but achievable goal. It couldn't be something like well outside of the realm of them being able to achieve. But within that high but achievable goal, okay, if I didn't get it, how can I get it? And that's kind of, we took all of these like ideas and we kind of put them into the journal, whatever sport you may be in, and chronologically takes you through your season. And as you've probably seen in there, after each game day, there's a section for, as an example, film review, where now you're seeing it in full living color, right? Full motion video is showing you, yes, I met my goals that I set for the day, or, oh boy, maybe I didn't. And then, not that there's shame in any of that, because that's how you're going to get better too. You're challenging yourself. But now you're sitting there looking at what you wrote, 2 days prior, and now you're looking at it the day that you're sitting there doing film review, and you're going, here's how I can make that better. Or here's how I did achieve my goal, right? And hey, but not, lots of times our kids are like, oh, I didn't do it. And then they're like, what, okay, well, how can you do it? You got to kind of peel it back a little bit and say, well, okay, well, what's the next step? don't take that as the final. How can you improve? How can you be better? How can you feel better about your job or your effort level or whatever that may be? And when they're all doing it together, that rolls back to, I think, what you were asking in my roundabout way, in a long way, getting back to your question. That's the accountability. They're holding themselves accountable as an individual because they know what they wrote down, but they're also holding themselves accountable as a teammate because they know what they're asking of themselves and they know what they're asking of the teammate and vice versa. So they can look at each other and go, we as a individual can do better here, but we as a group, as a team, as a unit, as an offensive unit or a defensive unit or a goalie and a defenseman, how can we be better? And they can hold each other accountable that way too, in a healthy way. No yelling, no screaming at each other like, hey, that goal was your fault, because you're all on the field together, obviously.
All right, so I want to get on the topic of motivation. That's another one that's pretty tough to, especially in children who may not have a specific motivation for a specific sport, but they're playing maybe for social reasons or other reasons. How do you find that motivation? How do you coach that motivation at that early stage?
So I think you have to be able to understand why your kids are playing. And so in the journal, we've got a space for, why do I play baseball? Why do I swim? Why do I run track and field? Because I think it's important for the coaches to understand, is a kid on that team because their friends are on the team and they just are doing it for that social reason? Or is a kid doing it because their parents are making them? Or is it that they actually want a scholarship to college? Because then you, as a coach, you can kind of work through that motivation of, what's important. This is a great story. I was talking to a rugby coach about her high school team, and she was telling me that she met with them at the beginning of season, was like, okay, everybody, so what do we want out of this season? What do we want the season to look like? And they were all like, we want to win. We want to win the championship. And she's like, okay, awesome. I'm on board. Well, then she went back. She kind of got a plan together, went back to practice the next day and was like, okay, this is what it's going to take for us to win the championship. And she said it was amazing. All of a sudden, the girls are like, that's not really what we want to do. And she said it was just kind of eye-opening for her to go, okay, when we just say it, that's what we want, but then we didn't really want to do the work that was going to be required for us to be the championship team. They still wanted to have a good season and they wanted to play hard, but they didn't want to do maybe some of the extra things. So I think one of the most important things for a coach, and when you're coaching kids, is to understand, what is it that those kids are looking for? What are you trying to do? And that's not to say that you can't make a winning team out of a whole group of kids that don't want to play in college, because it's definitely possible to do. I think you have to be able to understand why they're there. You have to be able to work to that. And part of the setting goals is, those baby steps, the small goals and the big goals, because celebrating the small wins can motivate kids to then do, a bigger goal, because sometimes it's just that disbelief. They don't really think that they can do it, and maybe setting those small goals. And I think kids do struggle with setting appropriate goals for what they're wanting to do when they're playing sports. And sometimes coaches knowing that information about them can help them set the right goals that can help put them on the path, because as you have those wins along the way, that is very motivational to keep going.
Yeah, and once a coach kind of understands and knows the motivation question, which is kind of a really hard question because I don't remember as an athlete coming up through the ranks anybody going, why are you here? I never remember somebody saying that. Maybe they did, but I was a kid who really just loved playing my sport and wanted to keep going. You can, as a coach, once you have that information, now you can take your group and you can mold that group from the kid who wants to play professional sports to the kid who might just be there because his friends are there and he enjoys it. And maybe even to the point where his mom and dad said, hey, you got to get out of the house, go do something. But you take that whole group and you get them some goals and objectives as a unit. And now, just like Tina was saying, hey, maybe one or two victories. And now this kid who wasn't necessarily sure, but you had an idea because of the motivational question that you had asked, Now you're starting to bring everybody up. Everybody is buying in to what the team or the unit wants to achieve. And that also goes back to the previous question on accountability too. It's a lot easier for all those student athletes to kind of hold each other accountable, make sure everybody's there on time, make sure everybody's got the right gear and for whatever it may be, film review or practice or game day. And then they're moving forward as a group to achieve whatever those goals may be as a group. And I think that motivation question is really important and being able to understand that.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And something that really impressed me, reading your bios was that both of you, I think your daughter as well, Skylar, was team captain at some point in your athletic careers. Um, how how did that come about as far as becoming team captain? What does it take to be a team captain? And how do you identify that in your children or in your on your team as a coach? How does that kind of come to fruition?
Man, a lot of it is an innate personality trait or an innate skill, in my opinion. If you try too hard, or if a coach picks an athlete who they want to be the captain, that person may not be the leader in that unit of student athletes. And that's a really hard spot to put a kid in. And probably everybody who's been involved in sports has seen a parent who is a coach pick their kid as the captain.
Yeah.
Maybe
Yeah.
regardless of skill level, maybe they're one of the better players, but maybe they're not captain material because having one of your better players be a natural born leader is a really, really awesome thing to have as a coach of student athletes. But if you try to implant, I guess, if you will, somebody into that leadership position in the youth sports environment, it's really easy if you look close enough to see that it's not really going to happen the way maybe that you would like it to happen. When I was coaching, we let the kids vote on who the team captain was going to be. And then I always would tell them, hey, if it's obvious to me that you're making this a popularity contest, I will trump your vote, right? Or I will maybe add in somebody along the lines, one more captain, the person you voted for, and then this person as well to even it out. But miraculously, if you just leave the student athlete and the team to their own devices, they were spot on every time on who they picked. They were always picking the person that they kind of emulated or wanted to be, the person that was there on time, the person that was there and ready to perform, the person that could have something negative happen on the field or negative at practice happen, like a bad play, and then keep moving forward. And that person was who those other student athletes saw. And it's a really dynamic thing. It's a really important thing too, to make sure that your conduit between the team as a coach, in my opinion, is a kid who they are looking up to and that they're seeing as a positive role model, almost if it's somebody their age, even if it's somebody younger than them or somebody older, either one. If you have the right individual in that job, it really is a positive factor in the overall goals and objectives and what you're going to achieve as a group.
And I think for kids who like that's their goal, like they join a team, they're like, hey, I really want to eventually be captain when I'm, in the age group that gets selected for that. I think watching the people above them is important. I think getting parental assistance. I mean, we talk about a lot of stuff in our house. So for us, we spent a lot of time in examples and in experiences and things that happened to us. I think, like Tony said, it is some of the leadership. It's also being that player that everybody can count on. They know you're going to be there and not, you're setting the example. You're always there on time. You're doing the right thing. I think those are all big pieces. And I think kids just have to decide if that's kind of what they want. And then they have to look at the behaviors that others are doing and then determine, hey, this is what I want to do. And how do I act like that? How do I study leadership? A lot of kids will, I know in the college side, a lot of coaches will have them read books on leadership, on sports and things like that, and talk about how to be a good leader on a team. So I think putting all those things together, and number one, knowing that that's what you want to do, and then just kind of making sure that you're behaving in that manner and you're being an overall, a good person, a good player, and a great example to others.
Gotcha. That's awesome. That's awesome. And I thank you off camera, but also on camera, thank you both for your service to the country. Very much
Anytime.
respected and appreciated. How did your experience in the Air Force, in the military, help shape you all into doing what you're doing now?
Well, it's interesting because we played sports while we were in the military too, so it all kind of comes together in one thing. As far as something that I learned as I continued, I flew A-10s in the Air Force for a long time, and we always start our briefings with our objectives, and we always brief for 50 minutes before we go fly. We brief, and if your briefing is good, then your briefing is incorporating your objectives and how you will help your flight achieve those goals while you're there. And then when we come back after the mission, we sit and we watch tape, and we debrief to our objectives. Did we meet them? How did we meet them? And if not, how can we improve? And within that framework of doing that and kind of learning that and repeating that throughout my career, I think as I started to get into helping our daughters with sports and that type of thing, it made me realize what we were doing there really just transitions directly over to what they're doing in their sports as well, even though what I was doing was something drastically different, flying airplanes in the military, but how we were accomplishing goals and objectives and how we were meeting them and how we were getting better and how we were holding each other accountable as a team, that was the exact same thing that maybe unknowingly I had been doing as a hockey player, but now I can look at my kids' sports, and as they grow up as student athletes, you can really incorporate that in to help them out as well and give them something. Here's what we're going to do. Here's how we're going to do it. Try to execute it, and then see where you can improve on, right? And that was kind of that circle of things right there is really where you start to narrow down and you start to be able to build, we want to win a championship. Well, that's an objective, but now, like, what are you going to do? Like, hey, we want to have a win percentage here. We want our offense to gain this many yards per game here. We want our defense to hold our opponents to this here. And now you're starting to build those those objectives that you can break down and see, and they're measurable each time that you have a game or each time that you have a practice. And that was something that I think really was internalized in me in my military career, and then also kind of faded back to helping my daughters and with their sports and stuff and that type of thing, and the accountability and being there on time and being responsible and all those things that we're talking about. They were kind of hand in hand going back and forth.
Makes sense. Makes sense completely. I know both of you are big on daily habits, the power of daily habits. Can you just sort of elaborate on that a little bit and how that helps on the sports side?
So daily habits, here's what I'm going to say. You should always be working on that because it's really hard to create daily habits and to stick to daily habits. And I think that's something that, even people like us who have been very regimented, in some of our military aspect, it is, really sitting down, it's looking at a calendar and saying, hey, from this time to this time, we're working on this. From, this time to this time is time for this aspect. Daily habits, I think, reading from good books. There's tons and tons of great leadership and business books out there to read that, can help you. And a lot of times it's just one thing, right? Yeah, I mean, you could read a whole book, you could go to a seminar, go to a great inspirational, motivational speech. And even if you just took away one nugget, just one little piece of information and adopted that into your life, you'd see a huge change. Um, I think the journaling piece is a big deal to really just kind of get things out on paper. And one of the coaches that we talked to was like, it's interesting what kids will write about in the journal that they won't tell you, because there's just something freeing about putting it on paper that, you can maybe keep to yourself, lock it up in a cabinet or whatever, but being able to kind of write through your struggles, because life is a struggle. I mean, we're all going to have a struggle, whether it's, in our relationships or in our businesses, with employees, with employers. I mean, life is a struggle and you have to be able to work through that. And I think, the sports aspect for both of us really helps you to kind of focus in on, what is it I'm trying to do? And okay, today I had a bump in the road and today I didn't do as much as I want to do, but what am I doing tomorrow? And it's, getting back on those daily habits, especially because I think sometimes people they'll start the daily habits. Maybe they, run strong for a couple weeks and then life happens. They fall off and you just need to get back to that. So we're trying to help incorporate that daily habit of looking at your goals. And then each day, are you taking a step forward to achieving those goals? And if you're not, then you need to take a step back and look at your goal and say, maybe my goal's too big for right now. Maybe I need a lesser goal that's easier for me to attain.
And what are some of your family goals as a business over the next 2 or 3 years? Where do you guys see yourselves evolving and improving and growing over the next several years as a business?
I mean, we would love to get this journal in the hands of thousands of coaches and athletes across the school districts, both in high school and in college. We just feel really strongly that this is a great tool to use to help kids just really focus on themselves, to be more self-aware of what they're doing, what direction they're trying to go. I think we just read an article that said 70% of executives are athletes or former athletes. So, I mean, that's a huge number. And if you look at CEOs, the number was actually even higher who were actually athletes growing up. So, there is a transition from sports to your business world or whatever you're doing as a future adult. And we want to encourage kids to learn about that because right now, we don't feel like there's a lot of instruction in high schools, high middle school on how to even set appropriate goals, then how to track them, how do you even set up a plan to get there? And so I would say that's probably our biggest family goal with this business is just trying to get this in the hands of the most coaches and kids to make an impact on them so that they can learn life lessons that then they can use those into their future.
Awesome. And where can we find you all on social media? Where can we find online? Just tell our audience where to find some of this information.
So we are on Instagram at Sports Hogs, and it's HAWGS. So make sure you spell it a little bit different. And then we do a little bit on TikTok, not too much. So, but mostly Instagram. We do have a Facebook page at Sports Hogs as well. And then our website is www.sportshawgs.com. On there, you can find all the tools for coaches and for athletes, because we also have a coach's journal that goes along with our athlete journal so that a coach can follow along and have their own essential journey with their athletes. And we did a few different things in the coach's journal. They have a few more journal prompt questions on, what do they want out of their support staff? Different things like that. What are they looking for out of their players? Things that are a little bit different. Their stats page is a little different because from game to game, we figured, and we know from our experience that coaches like flexibility to track specific things that aren't necessarily the normal stats like the NCAA is tracking. Maybe they worked on something at practice that week and they specifically want to see if those kids are running that play or doing that play in a proper manner. So we wanted to give them enough flexibility for that. And then, pages for notes, film review, things like that.
Wow, that's awesome. And Tony and Tina Rowe, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and joining Adeptus on Air. And just keep up the great work. Very much needed, the work that you all do in the space of youth sports and sports in general. So thank you so much for joining, and keep up the great work.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us, James.
Thanks for listening to Adeptus on Air. If you like this episode, please subscribe and leave a review. The views and opinions by the podcast speakers and guests are solely their own and do not reflect the opinions of Adeptus. This podcast provides general information only and is not intended to constitute advice.